ग्रंथ नारायण गोसाई महाराज श्री गुरुदेव की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अशतरशतस्मत् श्रील भक्ति वेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अशतरशतस्मत् श्रील भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अशतरशतस्मत् श्रील भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अशतरशतस्मत् श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट महाभागवत श्रील गोक्षरदास बाबाजी महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्त विनोद ठाकुर की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्रील जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की जय। श्री रूपनो गौरीय गुरु वर्ग की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल पतदास रघुनाथ शारद गोसाई प्रभु की जय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गौर पार्षद वृंद की जय। नाम जय श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जय। श्री मोहन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाय की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्-भागवतम की जय। श्री भक्ति विघ्न विनाशंकरी श्री नृसिंह भगवान की जय। भक्त प्रभा श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो ओं विष्णुपदाय राधिकाय प्रियात्मने श्रीमद्-भक्ति वेदांत नारायणति नामिने। नमो ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतिशे नमः। गुरुवे गौरचन्द्राय राधिकायै तदालय गुरुवे गौरचन्द्राय राधिकायै तदालय कृष्णाय कृष्णभक्ताय तद्भक्ताय नमो नमः। यं प्रव्रजन्तम् अनुपे इतो नृसिंहो परतो नृसिंहो यतो यतो यमि ततो नृसिंहो बाह्यर्नृसिंहो हृदये नृसिंहो नृसिंहमादिं शरणं प्रपदे साई। यं प्रव्रजन्तम् अनुपेतमपेतकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरहकातर आजुहाव पुत्रेति तन्मयतया तरवोऽभिनेदुस्तं सार्वभूत हृदयं मुनिमानतोऽस्मि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्णा पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदन्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विधुनोति सुहृत्सतम्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। तवैवास्मि न जीवामि त्वया विना इति विज्ञाय राधे त्वां नायमां चरणान्तिकम्। Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshai Kshiptashtakama madhe Kripa mai tvam sharanam prapanna Vrinde namaste charanaravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams, Yashji, Indira Mataji, Gargaraji, Raseshwari Mataji, Rupa Manjari Didi, Madhavi Didi, Charu Didi. Oh, is it really loud again? I'll shut my window. Give me a second, guys. Yeah, it's still going. That's Durga Puja. It goes on for a while. It's not just the day of. One second. Alright. Hopefully that's a bit better now. Alright. So let me. Alright, so Narad Muni describes the story of Jaya and Vijay. This is in the first chapter at the end. He tells about how the four Kumaras, they went to Vishnu Loka, and they looked like 5-year-old children. The two gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijay, forbade them. Then they cursed Jaya and Vijay. You are agitated by passion and ignorance, and are unfit to live at the lotus feet of Lord Madhudrisha. Take birth as demons in the material world. But then, as Jaya and Vijay were falling, the Kumaras told them kindly, your curse will end in 3 births, and you will be able to return to Vaikuntha. So the first birth, Jaya and Vijay thus descended into the material world as the sons of deity Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. They were killed by the Supreme Lord in his incarnations as Nrsingadev and Varahadev, respectively. Hiranyakashipu desired to kill his son Prahlad and tortured him in many ways. Then the second birth, we hear. And then the second birth, they appeared as Ravan and Kumbhakarna, which you may hear more about from Markandeya Rishi. Then they appeared as your cousins, Shishupal and Dantavakra. Being struck by the disc of Lord Krishna, they are now free from the curse. By the way, this is Narad speaking to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Then they maintained a feeling of enmity towards the Lord for a long time. Because of always thinking of Krishna in this way, they regained the shelter of the Lord in Vaikuntha. Then Yudhishthira asked, why was there enmity between Hiranyakashipu and his beloved son Prahlad? How did Prahlad become such a great devotee of Krishna? So then Narad Rishi explains to Yudhishthira Maharaj that when Hiranyaksha was killed by Varahadev, Hiranyakashipu was enraged. He blasphemed Vishnu and instructed the demons to persecute the Brahmins and destroy Vedic culture. The demons executed his orders. Then after performing the death rites of his brother, Hiranyakashipu spoke to his afflicted relatives. Let's hear what he said. I'm going to go to the book 20. So after performing the death rites for his brother, Hiranyakashipu tried to pacify his mother Diti, sister-in-law Rushabhanu, and his nephews
Shakuni, Shambhara, and others. Although angry, being a great politician, he knew how to act according to time and situation. Thus he spoke sweet words as follows. Do not lament for a hero's death, because a hero's death in front of his enemy is glorious and desirable. The jivas join together in a family by superior arrangement, and they get separated by their own karma, just as travelers join together at a restaurant and depart to their respective destinations after drinking water. The soul is eternal, inexhaustible, free from material contamination, can go anywhere in the material or spiritual worlds, is full of knowledge, and different from the body. But because of ignorance and misuse of his slight independence, the soul accepts subtle and gross bodies created by the material energy and thus subjected to so-called material happiness and distress. Examples. A tree seems to move when reflected in moving water. The land appears to move when the eyes move due to some mental derangement or intoxication, I think, right? That's what I remember. Similarly, when the mind is agitated by the movements of the modes, the soul, although pure and freed from subtle and gross bodies, thinks that he is identical with those bodies. In such a bewildered state, the jiva discriminates between people as friends and enemies, and thus enjoys or suffers in various material bodies. This continued material life is called samsara. Birth, death, lamentation, foolishness, and anxiety are due to such material considerations. Then Hiranyakashipu narrates the story of Suyajña. In this regard, there is an old historical example of a discourse by Yamarāja to the relatives of a dead person. Please hear attentively. Suyajña was the king of Ushinar. When he was killed in a battle, his kinsmen began to lament. The slain king Suyajña fell with his bejeweled armor smashed, ornaments fallen, hair scattered, eyes lusterless, body smeared with blood, heart pierced with arrows, teeth still biting his lips, face covered with dust and arms broken. His queens cried, seeing him thus killed by fate. "O Lord, now that you are killed, we are also killed." They fell at his feet with tears, pounding their breasts. Their hair disarrayed and ornaments fell. All this evoked sympathy of others. The queens lamented, saying, "You are the maintainer of Ushinar, and now you increase the lamentation of its population. O Lord, the cruel providence has taken you away from our sight. You are a grateful husband and our most sincere friend. We cannot exist without you. We will follow you. We will die and serve you." They didn't know the dead body to be burnt, even though the sun was about to set. They didn't allow the dead body to be burnt. Their cries reached the abode of Yamarāja, who then personally came in the form of a boy to advise them. And then the verses 37 to 57 describe the instructions of Yamarāja to the queens of Suyajña. Is that what we read up to? Let me just check really quick. 38. So Yamarāja instructs the queens of Suyajña about the eternal soul. He says, "Alas, it is amazing that these people, older than me, who have seen thousands of births and deaths, are still bewildered. After death, one goes to an unknown place from where he has come. There is no exception to this. Why lament uselessly? Oho vayam danya tamaya ratra tyaktra pitribhyam na vichintayama abhakshamana abalavrikadibi sarakshita rakshati yohi garbe." It is wonderful that these elderly women do not have a higher sense of life than we do. Indeed, we are most fortunate, for although we are children and have been left to struggle in material life, unprotected by father and mother, and although we are very weak, we have not been vanquished or eaten by ferocious animals. Thus we have a firm belief that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given us protection even in the womb of the mother, will protect us everywhere. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:61, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridesherjuna tishtati. The Lord is present in the core of everyone's heart. Thus the Lord gives protection to everyone and gives the different types of bodies the living entity wants to enjoy. Everything is done by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should not lament the birth and death of a living being, which have been arranged by the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. One must act according to the direction of the Lord within the heart. Because the conditioned soul wants to act independently, the Lord gives him the facility to act and experiences the reactions. The Lord says, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamikam sharanam braja. Give up all other duties and simply surrender unto me. One who does not abide by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given the facility to enjoy in this material world. Instead of restricting him, the Lord gives the conditioned soul the opportunity to enjoy, so that by mature experience, after many, many births, bahunam janamanam ante, he will understand that surrender to the lotus feet of Vasudeva is the only duty of all living beings. Ya ichayesha srjati tam avyayo, ya eva rakshatya valumpate chaya, tasya bala kridanam ahurishitush, characharam nigraha sangrahe prabhu. The boy addressed the women. O weak women, only by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never diminished, is the entire world created and maintained and annihilated. This is the verdict of the Vedic knowledge. This material creation, consisting of the moving and non-moving, is exactly like his plaything. Being the Supreme Lord, he is completely competent to destroy and protect. Purport. In this regard, the queens might argue, if our husband was protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead when in the womb, why is he not given protection now? To this question, the answer is, Ya ichayesha srijatidam avyayo ya eva rakshyata valumpate chaya. One cannot argue with the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is always free, and therefore he can protect and can also annihilate. He is not our order carrier. Whatever he likes, he will do. Therefore, he is the Supreme Lord. The Lord does not create this material world at anyone's request, and therefore he can annihilate everything merely by his will. That is his supremacy. If one argues, why does he act in this way? The answer is that he can do so because he is supreme. No one can question his activities. If one argues, what is the purpose of this sinful creation and annihilation? The answer is that to prove his omnipotence, he can do anything, and no one can question him. If he were answerable to us concerning why he does something and why he does not, his supremacy would be curtailed. Pati chutam tishtati dishtarakshitam grihe stitam tad vihatang vinashyati jivatanato pi tarak ikshito vane grihe bigupto syahato najivati. Sometimes one loses his money on a public street where everyone can see it, and yet his money is protected by destiny and not seen by others. Thus the man who lost it gets it back. On the other hand, if the Lord does not give protection, even money maintained very securely at home is lost. If the Supreme Lord gives one protection, even though one has no protector, and is in the jungle, one remains alive, whereas a person well protected at home by relatives and others sometimes dies, no one being able to protect him. Purport. These are examples of the supremacy of the Lord. Our plans to protect or annihilate do not act, but whatever he thinks of doing actually happens. The examples given in this regard are practical. Everyone has had such practical experiences, and there are also many other clear examples. For instance, Prahlad Maharaj said that a child is certainly dependent on his father and mother, but in spite of their presence, the child is harassed in many ways. Sometimes, in spite of a supply of good medicine and an experienced physician, a patient does not survive. Therefore, since everything is dependent on the free will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our only duty is to surrender unto Him and seek His protection. Bhutani tastar nijayoni karmabhir bhavanti kale na bhavanti sarvasha na tatra hatma prakritattav apistitas tasya gunar anyatamo hi bhadyate. Every conditioned soul receives a different type of body according to his work, and when the engagement is finished, the body is finished. Although the spirit soul is situated in the subtle and gross material bodies in different forms of life, he is not bound by them, for he is always understood to be completely different from the manifested body. Purport. Here it is very plainly explained that God is not responsible for the living entities accepting different types of bodies. One has to accept a body according to the laws of nature and one's own karma. Therefore, the Vedic injunction is that a person engaged in material activities should be given directions by which he can intelligently apply his activities to the service of the Lord to become free from the material bondage of repeated birth and death. Sakarmanatam abhyarcha siddhim vindanti manava. The Lord is always ready to give directions. Indeed, His directions are elaborately given in Bhagavad Gita. If we take advantage of these directions, then in spite of our being conditioned by the laws of material nature, we shall be free to attain our original constitution. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etan tarantite. Bhagavad Gita 7:14. We should have firm faith that the Lord is supreme and that if we are surrendered to Him, He will take charge of us and indicate how we can get out of material life and return home back to Godhead. Without such surrender, one is obliged to accept a certain type of body according to his karma, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a demigod, and so on. Although the body is obtained and lost in due course of time, the spirit soul does not actually mix with the body, but is subjugated by the particular modes of nature with which he is sinfully associated. Spiritual education changes one's consciousness so that one simply carries out the orders of the Supreme Lord and becomes free from the influence of the modes of material nature. Idam shariram purushasya mohajam yata pratak bhautikam iyate graham yato dakai partivaitai jasaranjana kalena jato vikrito vinashyati. Just as a householder, although different from the identity of his house, thinks his house to be identical with him, so the conditioned soul, due to ignorance, accepts the body to be himself, although the body is actually different from the soul. This body is obtained through a combination of portions of earth, water, and fire, and when the earth, water, and fire are transformed in the course of time, the body is vanquished. The soul has nothing to do with this creation and dissolution of the body. Purport. We transmigrate from one body to another in bodies that are products of our illusion. But as spirit souls, we always exist separately from material conditional life. The example given here is that a house or car is always different from its owner, but because of attachment, the conditioned soul thinks it to be identical with him. A car or house is actually made of material elements. As long as the material elements combine together properly, the car or house exists. And when they are disassembled, the house or the car is disassembled. The spirit soul, however, always remains as he is. Yatha nalo darushu bhinna iyate, yatha nilo deha gata pratakstita, yatha nabha sarva gatam nasajate, tata puman sarva gunashraya para. As fire, although situated in wood, is perceived to be different from the wood, as air, although situated within the mouth and nostrils, is perceived to be separate, and as the sky, although all-pervading, never mixes with anything, so the living entity, although now encaged within the material body of which it is the source, is separate from it. Sorry guys, purport. In Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains that the material energy and spiritual energy both emanate from him. The material energy is described as me bhina prakritir ashtada, the 8 separated energies of the Lord. But although the 8 gross and subtle material energies, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, are stated to be bhina, separate from the Lord, actually they are not. As fire appears separate from wood, and as the air flowing through the nostrils and mouth of the body appears separate from the body, so the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears separate from the living being, but is actually separate and not separate simultaneously. Achinta Beda Bed. This is the philosophy of propounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why is there an up there? According to the reactions of karma, the living being appears separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually, he is very intimately related with the Lord. Consequently, even though we now seem neglected by the Lord, he is actually always alert to our activities. Under all circumstances, therefore, we should simply depend on the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus revive our intimate relationship with him. We must depend upon the authority and control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Suyajña nandvayam shete murdayam anushochata yashrotadyo nuvakteha sadisha drishyeta karhichit. Sana drishyeta karhichit. Yamarāja continued, O lamenters, you are all fools. The person named Suyajña, for whom you lament, is still lying before you and has not gone anywhere. Then what is the cause for your lamentation? Previously he heard you and replied to you, but now, not finding him, you are lamenting. This is contradictory behavior, for you have never actually seen the person within the body who heard you and replied. There is no need for your lamentation, for the body you have always seen is lying here. Purport. This instruction by Yamarāja in the form of a boy is understandable even for a common man. A common man who considers the body the self is certainly comparable to an animal. Yasyatma buddhi gunapi tridhatuke sa eva gokara. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10:84-13. But even a common man can understand that after death a person is gone, although the body is still there. A dead man's relative, although the body is still there, a dead man's relatives lament that the person has gone away, for a common man sees the body but cannot see the soul. As described in Bhagavad Gita, Dehi nosmin yata dehe. It's 2:13. The soul, the proprietor of the body, is within. After death, when the breath within the nostrils has stopped, one can understand that the person within the body who is hearing and replying has now gone. Therefore, in effect, the common man concludes that actually the spirit soul was different from the body and has now gone away. Thus, even a common man coming to his senses can know the real person who is within the body. they can know that the real person who was within the body and was hearing and replying was never seen. For that which was never seen, what is the need of lamentation? Just checking the comments really quick. Okay. Okay, cool. And we're reading up to 56. Okay, that's going to be the last verse. Oops. Nashrata nanuvaktavyam ukhyopyatra mahanasu yastvihendriyavan atma sachanya pranadehayo. In the body, the most important substance is the life air, but that is neither the listener nor the speaker. Beyond even the life air, the soul can do nothing, for the super soul is actually the director, in cooperation with the individual soul. The super soul conducting the activities of the body is different from the body and living force. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead distinctly says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham hridisannavishto mataspritir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Although the Atma, or soul, is present in every material body, dehinosmin yatha dehe, he is not actually the chief person acting through the senses, mind, and so on. The soul can merely act in cooperation with the supersoul, because it is the supersoul who gives him directions to act and to not act. Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. One cannot act without his sanction, for the supersoul is upadrashta and anumanta, the witness and sanctioner. One who studies carefully under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master can understand the real knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the conductor of all activities of the individual soul, and the controller of the results as well. Although the individual soul possesses the indriyas, or senses, he is not actually the proprietor, for the proprietor is the supersoul. Consequently, the supersoul is called Hrishikesh, and the individual soul is advised by the direction of the supersoul to surrender to him and thus be happy. Samadharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Thus he can become immortal and be transferred to the spiritual kingdom, where he will achieve the highest success of an eternal, blissful life of knowledge. In conclusion, the individual soul is different from the body, senses, living force, and the airs within the body, and above him is a supersoul, who gives the individual soul all facilities. The individual soul who renders everything to the supersoul lives very happily within the body. Bhutendriya manolingan dehan uchavachan vibhu bhajatut srijati hyanya bhajatut srijati hyanyas tachapi svena tejasa. The 5 material elements, the 10 senses, and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entity comes in contact with his material bodies, whether high or low, and later gives them up by his personal prowess. This strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different types of bodies. Purport. The conditioned soul has knowledge, and if he wants to fully utilize the gross and subtle bodies for his real advancement in life, he can do so. It is therefore said here that by his high intelligence, Svena Tejasa, by the superior power of superior knowledge achieved from the right source, the spiritual master, or Acharya, he can give up his conditional life in a material body and return home back to Godhead. However, if he wants to keep himself in the darkness of this material world, he can do so. The Lord confirms this as follows in Bhagavad Gita 9:25. Yanti deva vrata devan, pitrin yanti pitri vrata. Bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajina bimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. The human form of body is valuable. One can use this body to go to the higher planetary systems, to Pitriloka, or he can remain in this lower planetary system. But if one tries, he can also return home back to Godhead. This prowess is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a Supersoul. Therefore, the Lord says, Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. If one wants to receive real knowledge from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can become free from bondage to repeated acceptance of material bodies. If one takes to the devotional service of the Lord and surrenders unto Him, the Lord is prepared to give one directions by which to return home back to Godhead. But if one foolishly wants to keep himself in the darkness, he can continue in a life of material existence. Yavaling. These are the last 10 verses of the section. I'm going to stand up. I'm starting to feel a little bit tired. 1 second. Oh my God. Let me just move my laptop. There. That's better. Yavalinganvito hyatma tavat karma nibandhanam. How come my light's not coming on? There. Yavalinganvito hyatma tavat karma nibandhanam tato viparyaya klesho maya yogo nuvartate. As long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, he is bound to the results of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals continually, life after life. The living entity is bound by the subtle body consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. At the time of death, therefore, the position of the mind becomes the cause for the next body, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajantante kalevaram. At the time of death, the mind sets the criteria for the spirit souls being carried to another type of body. If a living being resists the dictation of the mind and engages the mind in the loving service of the Lord, the mind cannot degrade him. The duty of all human beings, therefore, is to keep the mind always engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Krishna, the intelligence is purified, and then the intelligence gets inspiration from the Supersoul, the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam Tam. Thus, the living entity makes progress toward liberation from material bondage. The individual living soul is subject to the laws of fruitive activity, but the Supersoul, Paramatma, is not affected by the fruitive activities of the individual soul. As confirmed in the Vedic Upanishad, the Paramatma and the Jivatma, who are likened to two birds, are sitting in the body. The Jivatma is enjoying or suffering by eating the fruits of the bodily activities, but the Paramatma, who is free from such bondage, witnesses and sanctions the activities of the individual soul as the individual soul desires. Vitata bhiniveshoyam yarguneshvar tadrik vacha yata manoratha swapna sarvam ayendrikam risha. It is fruitless to see and talk of the material modes of nature and the resultant so-called happiness and distress as if they were factual. When the mind wanders during the day and a man begins to think himself extremely important, or when he dreams at night and sees a beautiful woman enjoying with him, These are merely false dreams. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. Purport. The happiness and distress derived from the activities of the material senses are not actual happiness and distress. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita speaks of happiness that is transcendental to the material conception of life. Sukham antyantikam yat tar buddhi grahyam atindriyam. When our senses are purified of material contamination, they become atindriya, transcendental senses. And when the transcendental senses are engaged in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesh, one can derive real transcendental pleasure. Whatever distress or happiness we manufacture by mental concoction through the subtle mind has no reality, but is simply a mental concoction. One should therefore not imagine so-called happiness through mental concoction. Rather, the best course is to engage the mind in the service of the Lord Rishikesh, and thus feel real blissful life. There is a Vedic statement, apama somam amrita abhuma apsarobhir viharama. With reference to such a conception, one wants to go to the heavenly planets to enjoy with the young girls there and drink somaras. Such imaginary pleasure, however, has no value. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.23, antavat tu phalam tesham tar bhavat telpamedasham. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Even if, by fruit of activity or worship of the demigods, one is elevated to the higher planetary systems for sense enjoyment, his situation is condemned in Bhagavad Gita as antavat, perishable. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. For some time it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoctions of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and therefore have no meaning. Ata nityam anityam va neha sochanti tarvidha nanyata shakyate kartum swabhava shochitam iti. Those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore, it is difficult to educate a person in illusion. Purport. According to the Mimamsa philosophers, everything is eternal, nitya, and according to the Sankhya philosophers, everything is mithya, or anitya, impermanent. Nonetheless, without real knowledge of Atma, the soul, such philosophers must be bewildered and must continue to lament as Shudras. Srila Shukadev Goswami therefore said to Parikshit Maharaj, Shrota Vyadhini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrasha Apashyatam Atma Tattvam Griheshu Grihamedhinam. Those who are materially engrossed, being blind to knowledge of the ultimate truth, have many subjects for hearing in human society, O Emperor. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 2.1.2. For ordinary persons engaged in material activities, there are many subject matters to understand, because such persons do not understand self-realization. One must therefore be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances in life, he will remain steady in his vows. Lubdhako vipine kaschit pakshinam nirmitontaka vitatya jalamavadhadhe tatra palobhayam. There was once a hunter who lured birds with food and captured them after spreading a net. He lived, God, I'm having a hard time speaking all of a sudden. He lived as if appointed by death personified as the killer of the birds. Purport. This is another incident from the histories. Kulinga mitunam tatra vicharat samadrishyata tayo kulinga sahasa lubdakena pralobhita. While wandering in the forest, the hunter saw a pair of Kulinga birds. Of the two, the female was captivated by the hunter's lure. Sasajata shichastatriam mahishya kalayantrita kulingastam tatapannam niriksha bhrishya dukhita snehara kalpa kripanam paryadevayat. O queens of Suyajña, the male Kulinga bird, seeing his wife put into the greatest danger in the grip of providence, became very unhappy. Because of affection, the poor bird, being unable to release her, began to lament for his wife. Aho akaruna deva stri akarunaya vibhu kripanam mam anushachantya dinaya kim karishyati. Alas, how merciless is Providence! My wife, unable to be helped by anyone, is in such an awkward position and is lamenting for me. What will Providence gain by taking away this poor bird? What will be the profit? Kamam nayatu mam deva kim ardhenatmano hime dinena jivata dukham anena vidhurayusha. If unkind Providence takes away my wife, who is half my body, why should he not take me also? What is the use of my living with half my body, bereaved by loss of my wife? What shall I gain in this way? Katang tajata pakshangsta matrin hinam bibharmaham mandabhagya pratikshante nidhe me mataram praja. The unfortunate baby birds, bereft of their mother, are waiting in the nest for her to feed them. They are still very small and have not yet grown their wings. How shall I be able to maintain them? Purport. The bird is lamenting for the mother of his children because the mother naturally maintains and cares for their children. Yamarāja, however, in the guise of a small boy, has already explained that although his mother left him uncared for and wandering in the forest, the tigers and other ferocious animals had not eaten him. The real fact is that if the Supreme Personality of Godhead protects one, even though one be motherless and fatherless, one can be maintained by the good will of the Lord. Otherwise, if the Supreme Lord does not give one protection, one must suffer in spite of the presence of his father and mother. Another example is that sometimes a patient dies in spite of a good physician and good medicine. Thus, without the protection of the Lord, one cannot live, with or without parents. Another point in this verse is that fathers and mothers have protective feelings for their children, even in bird and beast society, not to speak of human society. Kali Yuga, however, is so degraded that a father and mother even kill their children in the womb on the plea of their scientific knowledge that within the womb the child has no life. Prestigious medical practitioners give this opinion, and therefore the father and mother of this day kill their children within the womb. How degraded human society has become. Their scientific knowledge is so advanced that they think that within the egg, that the embryo, there is no life. Now, these so-called scientists are receiving Nobel Prizes for advancing the theory of chemical evolution. But if chemical combinations are the source of life, why don't the scientists manufacture something like an egg through chemistry and put it in an incubator so that the chicken will come out? What is their answer? With their scientific knowledge, they are unable to create even an egg. Such scientists are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya-pahrita-jnana, fools whose real knowledge has been taken away. They are not men of knowledge, but they pose as scientists and philosophers, although their so-called theoretical knowledge cannot produce practical results. Evam Kulingam vilampantamarat priyaviyogaturam ashrukantam sa evatam shakunika sharena Vivyada kala prahito vilina. I don't know why I had such a hard time saying that verse. Vivyada kala prahito valina. Because of the loss of his wife, the Kulinga bird lamented, with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, following the dictations of mature time, the hunter, who was very carefully hidden in the distance, released his arrow, which pierced the body of the Kulinga bird and killed him. Wait, I thought I was supposed to read up to verse 56. Let me just see in here. Oh, I guess it's 61. Huh. Anyways, it's only 7:53. I'm going to read it. So let's just read up till for another couple minutes. Evam yom apashyantya atmapayam abuddhaya nainam prapsyata sochantya patim varsha shatarapi. Thus Yamarāja, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, "You are all so foolish that you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not know that even if you lament for your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never get him back alive. In the meantime, your lives will be finished." Purport. Yamarāja once asked Maharaj Yudhishthira, "What is the most wonderful thing within this world?" Maharaj Yudhishthira replied in Mahabharata Vanaparva 313.116. Ahanyahani bhutani gachantiha yamalayam sheshastavaram icchanti kim ashcharyam ataparam. Hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death at every moment, but a foolish living being nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing in this world. Everyone has to die because everyone is fully under the control of material nature. Yet everyone thinks that he is independent, that whatever he likes he can do, that he will never meet death but live forever, and so on. So-called scientists are now making various plans for which the living entities in the future can live forever. But while they are thus pursuing such scientific knowledge, Yamarāja, in due course of time, will take them away from their business of so-called research. Shri Hiranyakashipur Uvacha Bala evam pravadati sarve vismita chetasa gyatayo me nire sarvam anityam ayatotitam. Hiranyakashipu said, while Yamarāja, in the form of a small boy, was instructing all the relatives surrounding the dead body of Suyajña, everyone was struck with wonder by his philosophical words. They could understand that everything material is temporary, not continuing to exist. Purport. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.18. Antavanta ime deha nityasyokta sharirina. The body is perishable, but the soul within the body is imperishable. Therefore, the duty of those advanced in knowledge in human society is to study the constitutional position of the imperishable soul and not waste the valuable time of human life in merely maintaining the body and not considering life's real responsibility. Every human being should try to understand how the spirit soul can be happy and where he can attain an eternal, blissful life of knowledge. Human beings are meant to study these subject matters, not to be absorbed in caring for the temporary body, which is sure to change. No one knows whether he will receive a human body again. There is no guarantee, for according to one's work, one may get any body, from that of a demigod to that of a dog. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya comments, Aham mama bhimanadi tvayatotam anittakam mahadadi yatottam cha nityachapi yatotita asvatantraiva prakriti Svatantro nitya eva cha yatartha bhutascha para eka eva janardana. Only Janardana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is ever existing, but his creation, the material world, is temporary. Therefore, everyone who is captivated by the material energy and absorbed in thinking, I am this body and everything belonging to this body is mine, is an illusion. One should think only of being an eternal part. One should think only of being eternally a part of Janardhan, and one's endeavor in this material world, especially in this human form of life, should be to attain the association of Janardhan by going back home, back to Godhead. Yama itar upakhyaya tatraivantaryadhiyata gyatayo hi suyajñasya chakruryat samparayikam. After instructing all the foolish relatives of Suyajña, Yamarāja, in the form of a boy, disappeared from their vision. Then the relatives of King Suyajña performed the ritualistic funeral ceremonies. Ataso chatamayuyam param chatmanamevava ka atma ka parobatra sviya parakya evava sopara bhiniveshena vina jnanena dehinam. Sorry, I'm saying the Sanskrit too fast again. Therefore, none of you should be aggrieved for the loss of the body, whether your own or those of others. Only in ignorance does one make bodily distinctions, thinking, who am I? Who are the others? What is mine? What is for others? Purport. In this material world, the conception of self-preservation is the first law of nature. According to this conception, one should be interested in his personal safety and should then consider society, friendship, love, nationality, community, and so on, which have all developed because of bodily conception of life and a lack of knowledge of the spirit soul. This is called agyan. As long as human society is in darkness and ignorance, men will continue to make huge arrangements in the bodily conception of life. This is described by Prahlad Maharaj as bharam. In the materialistic conception, modern civilization makes enormous arrangements for huge roads, houses, mills, and factories. And this is a man's conception of the advancement of civilization. This is man's conception. People do not know, however, that at any time they themselves may be kicked out of the scene and forced to accept bodies that have nothing to do with these enormous houses, palaces, roads, and automobiles. Therefore, when Arjuna was thinking in terms of his bodily relationships with his kinsmen, Krishna immediately chastised him, saying, Kutastam kashmalamidam vishame samupastam anarishtam.
It's close.
God. Okay, we'll finish here. Let me just finish this purport. This bodily conception of life is befitting the Anaryans, the non-Aryans, advanced in knowledge. An Aryan civilization is a civilization advanced in spiritual knowledge, not merely by stamping oneself an Aryan does one become an Aryan. To keep oneself in the deepest darkness concerning spiritual knowledge and at the same time claim to be an Aryan is a non-Aryan position. In this connection, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam quotes as follows from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. Ka atma ka para iti dehadya apekshaya nahi dehadir atmasyan na chashatrur udirita ato dahika vridhova kshaye va kim prayojanam. Yastu dehagato jiva sa hinasham nagachati tata shatru vividocha swanashe shochanam kuta dehadi vyatirikto tu jivesho pratijanata atta atma vivritishutu vasudeve ratistira shatru nashas tata jnana nasho nanya katanchana. The purport is that as long as we are in this human form of body, our duty is to understand the soul within the body. The body is not the self. We are different from the body, and therefore there is no question of friends, enemies, or responsibilities in terms of the bodily conception of life. One should not be very anxious about the body's changing from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to old age, and then apparent annihilation. Rather, one should be very seriously concerned about the soul within the body and how to release the soul from the material clutches. The living entity within the body is never annihilated. Therefore, one should surely know that whether one has many friends or many enemies, his friends cannot help him, and his enemies cannot do him any harm. One should know that he is a spirit soul, aham brahmasmi, and that is the constitutional position of the soul, of the soul is unaffected by the changes of the body. In all circumstances, everyone, as a spirit soul, must be a devotee of Lord Vishnu and should not be concerned with bodily relationships, whether with friends or with enemies. One should know that neither we ourselves nor our enemies in the bodily conception of life are ever killed. Okay, I'm just going to read this verse, but not the purport, and we can read the purport tomorrow. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam iti daita patervakyam ditirakarnasashnusha putra shokam kshanat taktva tatve chittam adharayat. Shri Narad Muni continued, Diti, the mother of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, heard the instructions of Hiranyakashipu along with her daughter-in-law, Rushabhanu, Hiranyaksha's wife. She then forgot her grief over her son's death and thus engaged her mind and attention in understanding the real philosophy of life. All right, so that's the end of the chapter, and we'll just read this. What time is it? Or should I just read this and then we'll finish with the full chapter? It's not that long, it's just one paragraph. Let's just read this. I'm sorry for going over time, but it'll be 5 minutes over. When a relative dies, one certainly becomes very much interested in philosophy, but when the funeral ceremony is over, one again becomes attentive to materialism. Even daitas, who are materialistic persons, sometimes think of philosophy when some relative meets death. The technical term for this attitude of the materialistic person is shmashana vairagya, or detachment in a cemetery or place of cremation. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 4 classes of men receive an understanding of the spiritual life and God. Artha, the distressed; Jigyasu, the inquisitive; Artharthi, one who is desirous of material gains; and Jnani, one who is searching for knowledge. Especially when one is very much distressed by material conditions, one becomes interested in God. Therefore, Kunti Devi said in her prayers to Krishna that she preferred distress to a happy mood of life. In the material world, one who is happy forgets Krishna or God, but sometimes if one is actually pious but in distress, he remembers Krishna. Queen Kunti Devi therefore preferred distress because it is an opportunity for remembering Krishna. When Krishna was leaving Kunti Devi for his own country, Kunti Devi regretfully said that she was better off in distress because Krishna was always present, whereas now that the Pandavas were situated in their kingdom, Krishna was going away. For a devotee, distress is an opportunity to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 7th canto, 2nd chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki jai, Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudeva ki jai, Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Maha Bhagavat Srila Gorkshadas Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath, Shar Goswami Prabhu ki jai, Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari, Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund ki jai, Shri Amuna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai, Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai,
Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Bhakti Vigna Vinasankari Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Bhakta Pravar Shri Prahlād Maharaj ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Krishna Krishna Bhakti Pradevi Satyavataya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams, everybody. That's a really nice point from Vaisheshika Prabhu. That's exactly what life is like. It's kind of depressing. I don't know about that. I mean, what Hiranyakashipu was saying though is it's all true. Like we agree with that, but I guess the Mayavadis also agree with that. That's up to the point. We agree on all up to that point. But then beyond liberation, that's where there's. Well, no, actually, never mind. Yeah, the Mayavadis say that Krishna is undermined. So, anyhow, I am going to go right now. My brain isn't very clear right now, also. So, all right. See you all tomorrow, or we'll begin the 4th chapter. I wasn't expecting to read this much today. We went way over, but it's cool that we finished the chapter. I don't know. I have to look in. Once we go over tomorrow, then I will be more clear also. Yes, Mayavadis do have some talk about that. Is shared truth. Yeah. All right. Dandavat pranams, everybody. Haribol.